The universe is vast, but the true terror isn't in what we can see. It's in what watches us back. When I started studying the black hole VY-157, I thought I was on the verge of the discovery of a lifetime. Radiation waves were coming from it in patterns that defied any known explanation. They weren't just random pulses. They were messages. They were thoughts. For weeks, I analyzed the transmissions, convinced I was decoding the secrets of an incomprehensible cosmic phenomenon. But then, something changed. The patterns began to respond to my calculations. The equations I wrote came back to me, modified, corrected, as if something inside that void was teaching me, preparing me, until one day, the transmission ceased. And when I looked at the data for the last time, I realized something impossible. The last message wasn't a code, nor an equation. It was my name. The black hole VY-157 was 48,000 light-years from Earth, spinning in the void like a hungry mouth in the fabric of space. I shouldn't have been able to hear anything coming from it. But even in the absolute silence of the observatory, I felt an echo in my mind. Something in those radiation patterns seemed intentional. I spent months analyzing the electromagnetic waves emanating from its edge. At first, they were just natural fluctuations, or at least that's what traditional physics said. But then they started to repeat. Mathematical patterns emerged among the distortions. Perfect cycles of prime numbers, sequences that should never appear spontaneously. I studied them obsessively, certain I had discovered something new. Time lost meaning for me inside the Kepler 9 observatory, an orbital station dedicated to studying gravitational anomalies. My colleagues saw a common black hole. I saw a signal, and the more I watched, the more certain I became that I wasn't the only one looking. Everything changed the day I made the first attempt at communication. I used the station's microwave emitters to send calculated pulses of radiation, mirroring the patterns I was receiving from the black hole. Just an experiment, I told myself. Just a test. But deep down, part of me knew I was calling something. The response came immediately. The emissions shifted, adapting to what I was sending. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't coincidence. It was interaction. My heart hammered in my chest as I watched the patterns respond, adjusting to my frequency, like an animal learning to repeat the sounds of a human. But this wasn't a cosmic parrot. It was a being, an intelligence hidden in the darkness of space, on the other side of reality, responding to my calculations like a teacher correcting a student. The following days were an avalanche of discoveries. Every code I sent returned modified, improved, as if what was inside the black hole not only understood my math, but was enhancing it. I wasn't just observing a cosmic phenomenon. I was learning from something far, far more advanced. Then, without warning, the transmission stopped. The black hole fell silent, its radiation returning to normal randomness, as if whatever was inside had lost interest, as if it had been testing me, and found something else more interesting to focus on. My stomach churned as I reviewed the last data received. The final sequence wasn't an equation. It wasn't a numerical pattern. It was a set of characters arranged in an impossible way. My name, and then, like an eye opening from the other side of reality, the black hole saw me. The name blinked on the screen like a silent warning, each character glowing in the darkness of the station. Someone, or something, inside that black hole knew who I was. My body went rigid, my breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just an incomprehensible mathematical pattern. It was a direct message, a confirmation. With trembling fingers, I reviewed the previous data, trying to find a mistake, a rational explanation. Maybe it was an anomaly, a statistical coincidence. But the truth refused to fit into any known logic. The black hole had learned about me. It saw me. The Kepler 9 observatory operated autonomously, with a minimal crew for monitoring and maintenance. I was alone in the research room, surrounded by monitors that now seemed like luminous eyes, each reflecting fragments of a horror I still didn't fully comprehend. Should I call someone? Report what was happening? But how could I explain something like this without sounding like a madman? A growing sense of oppression settled in the environment. The air seemed heavier, as if the very gravity of the station had altered, but the sensors showed normal readings. The change wasn't around me. It was inside me. I closed my eyes, trying to ward off the sudden dizziness, but instead of relief, I was overtaken by something worse. An image formed in my mind, sharp as a lucid nightmare. It wasn't a vision of mine. It was something the black hole wanted me to see. It was a landscape that shouldn't exist, a sea of liquid darkness, dense and infinite, where indescribable shapes moved beneath the surface. The sky above wasn't a sky, but a field of spinning lights, like galaxies being devoured and recreated at the same time. And in the center, something waited for me, something immense, something ancient. I screamed and recoiled from the screen, feeling my own body shudder with the memory of it. But the scariest part wasn't what I had seen. It was the fact that the vision didn't seem strange. It felt like a memory. The silence of the station now felt unbearable. My thoughts were confused, tangled. How long had I been here? Hours? Days? Time seemed distorted, as if I were being pulled into a different reality, one that existed beyond the space and time I knew. Then, for the first time since the transmission had stopped, a new pattern appeared on the screen. But it wasn't a code, it was a map. And it wasn't a map of space. It was a path, a route that led directly into the black hole. My instincts screamed for me to ignore it, to shut down the system and forget this ever happened. But there was something about those coordinates that held me. The rational part of me, the part that was just a scientist, tried to find an explanation, and the only plausible answer was impossible. Someone was calling me from inside. The map pulsed as if alive. It reconfigured into fluid patterns, showing something that looked like topography, but that didn't make sense. Black holes don't have internal geography. According to all the physics we know, crossing the event horizon means complete annihilation of matter. So how could there be a place inside? My hands moved on their own, activating the station's controls. The auxiliary ship was docked to the observatory, ready for emergency maneuvers. I had never considered piloting it directly to the singularity, but now, that thought seemed inevitable. My mind wavered between fear and fascination. This was the kind of discovery that could change everything. It was a definitive answer to the greatest mystery in modern physics. If there was something in there, if there was a consciousness inside the black hole, then our laws of the universe were wrong. But what if it was something beyond science? Something we shouldn't have discovered? Then I felt the vertigo again. But this time, it wasn't just an image. It was a voice, a silent vibration, a pulse echoing at the back of my brain. Come. The message had no words, but the meaning was clear. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if the true horror wasn't just finding something unknown, but realizing it had been waiting for me all along. The auxiliary ship trembled slightly beneath my feet as the systems were activated. I adjusted the controls with surgical precision, each command bringing me one step closer to the impossible. The main screen displayed the black hole in disturbing detail, a vortex of absolute darkness, devouring the light around it like a bottomless abyss. My chest tightened. The primal instinct within me screamed to abort the mission, but something stronger guided me. The map continued to pulse on the cockpit screen, a winding line leading directly into the singularity. This shouldn't exist. It was as if the black hole wasn't just a destructive force, but a carefully designed labyrinth. Someone had built it, or worse, someone inhabited it. When the ship detached from the station, I felt a strange lightness, a weightlessness that wasn't just physical, but mental. The space around me seemed deeper, as if reality itself were curving around me in an invisible way. The engines hummed softly, and the entry trajectory was calculated. There was no turning back now. Crossing the event horizon meant disappearing forever. No information could escape from there. No signal, no memory, no consciousness. But then why could I see a path? Why was something inside it communicating with me? Was physics wrong? Or was reality itself being manipulated? The ship accelerated toward the spinning vortex. As I approached, space began to twist. The stars around me stretched into blurred lines, like reflections on broken glass. My body was overwhelmed by an increasing pressure, not just external but internal, as if my mind were being unpacked and reconstructed simultaneously. And then I crossed the threshold. Absolute silence settled in. There was no sound, not even the sound of my own heart. Time seemed fragmented. I saw overlapping moments, past and futures colliding, versions of myself in different states of consciousness, all observing the same infinite void. But I wasn't alone. It was there. Something was there. The liquid darkness stretched in all directions, but within it, eyes opened thousands, millions, each reflecting a different part of the cosmos. They didn't blink. They watched me, each carrying a fragment of thought and emotion, a voice I couldn't fully understand. But there was one name forming in the back of my mind. It was God, not in the human sense of the word, not a benevolent or vengeful entity, but an observer, a being who had always been here, in the place where time shatters. He didn't create, he remembered everything that had ever existed, every idea, every life, every death. Everything was within him, within the black hole. And then he spoke. I remember you. The phrase wasn't spoken, but engraved within my consciousness. Terror overtook me. Had I been here before? Every cell of my body tingled with the implication. This entity knew who I was, perhaps better than I knew myself. But then, if he remembered me, why didn't I remember him? It was then that I understood the truth my mind refused to accept. I was never the first to arrive here, and I never left. The idea of being trapped in this eternal cycle reverberated in my mind like a seismic wave. If I was never the first, if this had happened before, this wasn't just a physical or mental prison. It was a prison of perception, of identity. I no longer knew who I was, because my very existence was tangled within this cosmic entity. It was as if the black hole was a convergence point for all the lives, all the consciousnesses that had ever passed through there. And now, I was part of it. I saw all my mistakes, my failures, my decisions. The pain of my choices had never left me, but now it seemed amplified by something much greater. It was as if I were being forced to relive everything over and over. The weight of existence within this vortex was crushing. I no longer had control. I was no longer me. I was just a memory within the mind of this entity, like a cog in a vast machine. However, something strange happened. In the midst of this distortion, a feeling of freedom, something began to separate. The entity, the black hole, was pulling away from me. I no longer knew if I was dreaming or awake, but there was a fracture in what seemed to be reality. The space around me shattered, and I felt my body, my mind fragmenting. Was this the end, or something much worse? I saw light, a faint light, almost invisible, but as comforting as dawn. The truth began to form before me. The entity was not a physical being. It was a materialization of a much deeper concept, something beyond time, beyond reason. It was the accumulated knowledge of the universe, the memory of everything that had been and everything that would be. I was about to disappear into the vastness of this knowledge, a lost consciousness forever. But somewhere, deep inside me, there was still a last spark of will. I fought against the pressure. I wanted to know what was real and what was not. If everything happening was a cycle, could I break it? Or was I doomed to be part of this cosmic entity's memory for eternity? I threw myself into the light. I didn't know what would happen, but I knew it was my only chance not to get lost. The vortex in my mind spun even faster, but something strange occurred. The light expanded, and then everything unraveled. The black hole, the entity, space vanished. And then I woke up. I was back at the station, as if nothing had happened, as if the cycle had never existed. But something was different. I felt a presence, a strange sense of being watched. I knew something was following me, something that might never have left the black hole. I didn't know if I was free. I didn't know if this was a second chance, or just a new layer of the same cycle. But one thing I knew for sure, it was still there, watching me. And now, I knew that it knew me. What remains after meeting God in the black hole? An emptiness, or the constant reminder that somewhere, someone, or something is waiting